Well, right. I'll tell you a little secret.
Yeah.
When I was living away from home, when I was living away from the Mildura,
yeah.
My father came back from overseas with a Robertino Loretti album, and I don't know whether people know, but he was the boy soprano.
Oh.
And here he is.
Oh, here he is.
And this is it there. The Italian singing sensation.
Right.
And absolutely magnificent.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is Napolitano music and just beautiful.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then he grew up and his voice broke. And he's been to Australia many times.
Yeah, he has.
Robertino is his name, and that's my favourite album. Yeah. And I used to close my door and play Italian music all the time as a growing up. Now, when I went over to Italy, as I explained to you, to my with my first wife, we went to Lugo.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yeah.
And they had a big square in Lugo, and it was in honour of a fighter pilot in the First World War, the Second World War, one of the wars anyway. Anyway, I was walking down the street, and I couldn't work out why all the shops were closed. It was 12 noon, but I could hear this beautiful music in the background, played over the speakers. And then I learned, of course, they have siesta.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah, right. And they closed from 12 until 2.
Yeah.
And then they open their stores again. So anyway, I had to find out who this beautiful singer was. And his name was Corrado Graziani.
Yeah.
And that's the young fellow. So I don't know where he is today. But the most beautiful voice, and
but you're still a fan.
A big fan, and he sings "Mamma," a beautiful rendition of "Mamma," and of course I love the world's great. I love all the tenors.
Oh, all right, yeah.
I think they're just fantastic, and of course in Mildura at the time. Now this is something that we didn't talk about.
No.
In Mildura in the early days, there was no wedding.
Right.
Under 500 guests. And they used to be down at the Club Da Vinci,
right?
And they used to have Italian music as well as the pop music of the time. And one of the big names in the music at that time was a fellow by the name of Little Tony. How's that? And I still have them, and they're all in. And the Caruso, of course. You've got to have Caruso and the Beniamo Gigli, as well. So no, I love my collection.
Played everywhere. Yeah. What's interesting in the last 10 years actually is that there's been a process, certainly in Calabria and most of southern Italy, to revitalise southern Italian folk music.
Okay.
And there's a couple of people, one that have travelled the world playing basically southern Italian, in particular this chap Mimo Cavallaro does Calabrian because he's Calabrese, and he used to be together with a bloke called Cosimo Papandrea, but they split up and now they're both doing it. But why that's interesting is because it ties in now also with some of the provinces in Italy teaching what is considered to be a dialect, but it's actually they were all written languages, and which gets back to this: how do you establish your identity? I think what's happening is that they're realising that because of globalisation, they're better off focusing on their history, which includes their language, to retain that identity. So it'll be very interesting when we go over there. Hopefully we'll be able to get Cavallaro to come along and give us a play. So.
Well, we never spoke about my grandfather, and my grandfather, Vincenzo, he... now, you might be able to tell me this, and the listeners will be able to know this. There was a singer that... it was about a bandit, and it was a long story, a bandido or something, and and he sang the story. He told the story in song, and my grandfather used to have an old 48. Don't know where it is. 78, and I don't know where it is these days. But I used to sit down and listen to that with him.
Well, it might have been about. There was a fellow who's called Bandito Giuliano.
That's him.
Yeah,
that's it.
And there were songs written about that.
That's right.
Yeah, which is interesting in relation.
And that was in the Calabrian.
Yeah, it was. Not so popular now.
No, obviously.
I've got to say. No, I think again music has moved on, and one of the things that I mentioned Mimmo Cavallaro is that he's progressed the folk music. He hasn't gone back and just replayed what they were playing 100 years ago. He's actually developed, and it's if you go on YouTube, you'll see it's really wonderful, in my view, right? Because what's interesting is that it highlights the various influences, not just of Calabria, but in fact the whole of southern Italy, because you can pick up Greek, Arabic, in terms of the music, right?
Yes.
And the thing. So, hopefully when we go there, we'll be able to get a performance and we'll enjoy it. But that's good.
Of course, Elvis sat down and listened to a Solo Mio 100 times before he recorded It's Now or Never.
Yeah, that's true. And what got you onto Elvis? Back in the 50s?
Oh my God.
You must have been a rocker.
Don't even start, where I got... I think he's been in the blood all my life.
Right.
I see. And I even remember, he's one of those things, it's like, what were you doing when JFK was assassinated?
Yeah.
It's the same thing as what were you doing when Elvis Presley died? We all know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
If we're Elvis fans.
Yeah.
I never spoke about my my mother's sister, Auntie Mary or Teresa in the Italian language, but and I know it doesn't translate because Mary's Maria, but she was known as Auntie Mary, but her name was Teresa. She had 16 children.
Gosh.
In Melbourne,
right.
And they had farms like in Glen Waverley.
Right.
And they were a wonderful family, and all those siblings are all married.
They all survived.
All survived.
16.
Just one passed away in early birth.
That's amazing.
But and we've had a recent passing, very sad passing of Elizabeth. But there now this is interesting, because that was a very strict household.
Right.
Very strict.
Yeah.
Okay, now their children, the children of Auntie Mary, so their grandchildren, are all wonderfully attached to the Italian community and good. Italian ways and traditions.
Yeah.
So it depends, isn't it? Sometimes people, if they're brought up strict, they rebel, but some don't. So why is that?
I wish I knew. Is the answer. Right. I don't know, and that's one of the things. But as I said, we'd love to have more young people involved in the association, and we'd welcome them. But it's been very difficult to get them interested for whatever reason. I don't know. But anyway, that's good. But look. Mark, it's been great talking to you. Yeah. I'd love to meet your mother.
Well, being my soul, I tell you.
Well, I'm glad. Well, it's worth bearing. So.
Thank you.
But I'd love to meet your mother. I know she's 96, but you say she's very, very active, alert. And
no, she's not active, but she's alert. Yeah. But no, she'd love to talk to you.
Okay. Well, if it can be arranged whilst I'm down here, it'll be my pleasure. And again,
I don't know whether she'd be interviewed.
Oh well, I'd need to interview her because she's got a,
I'll lay 100 to 1 that she won't be interviewed.
Oh right. Well, if she won't, she won't. But it'll be. I think it'll be an interesting story.
It would,
that's because part of the reason for this is, of course, we don't have a history of the Calabrese in Australia, which is one of my aims, to get someone to write the history. And speaking to people like yourself, speaking to people like your mother, hopefully, is part of the process of getting people to actually record things that might never be known if they don't talk and they don't
Well, little things
Yeah.
like when my grandmother was, when my nunna was alive, and somebody needed assistance, and she would, because of ill health, she would bring a bowl out with water in it.
And the molecule.
Well, I don't. I think that's what you call it.
Yeah,
and
that
drop
is
the
what-
oil and
right.
see if it dissipates or whatever the case
And
may be.
she'd be-
Mum, when you said that name, what was the name again?
Molecule.
Yeah, she knew straight away. That's like when you
Pointing
say,
the bone in Aboriginal culture.
when you say, what's the word? When you what's that saying when don't talk too confidently, or don't throw too many plaudits at me, because it might turn around to be bad.
Yeah, well, that's a difficult
And that
thing.
loicule is in that.
Yeah.
Palmaloicule or something like that.
Well, yeah, the theory is that if you brag too much, you'll get molecule, because people...
That's right,
you
yeah.
know, what
And there's a phrase in Calabrese for
yeah,
that.
yeah, I don't know what the phrase is, to be
yeah.
honest. My Calabrese is not as good as it should be. But again, look, thanks very much, Mark, and I appreciate you taking the time
Pleasure.
to speak with me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Vince.
Okay.
Great, mate.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Bye-bye.